Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to spotlight the revamped Jaguar Warrior, which was greatly improved recently. As it just so happens, I made a video deep diving them just a few months ago, and had speculated on a few possible ways they could be improved to make them more common to see in multiplayer games. The devs were obviously thinking along the same lines, and recently traded some of their anti-infantry bonus for greater melee attack to make them more versatile, plus giving them a new ability to deal 1 extra damage for each unit they deal the final blow against, up to +4. In this video, we're going to focus on the gameplay impact of all of this. Before we get started though, just comparing them to some other infantry unique units at a glance, their high attack now really jumps out, and getting an extra +4 on top of this, and at a possible 21 attack in Castle Age, and up to 31 in Imperial Age after Garland Wars. That doesn't even really come with a trade-off. As you can see in other ways, they're still roughly in line with other infantry unique units in regard to HP, armor, and speed. Plus, they're not even that expensive at 60 food and 30 gold each. Where I think we should start though is with that interesting new ability of gaining attack with each unit they defeat to give a sense of how it works and how strong it is, as on paper adding another 4 attack to an already high attack unit sounds pretty intense. To put things into some perspective, here 20 vs 20 against longswords, 18 of the Jaguars survive, which is a great fight and should synergize well with this ability. If we then sort the surviving Jaguars in the fight by how much their attack has improved, notice the distribution we see, with basically 2/3 of the surviving units having no attack or +1 from the fight, and there's just a single Jaguar down to 1 health that has the full +4. It is just one example, but illustrates it's mostly grizzled veterans with 1 foot in the grave that are getting the full attack increase. However, there is still +18 attack spread out over this army, meaning in the next fight they'll hit as if there's 1 extra unit. Obviously, players who heal up units will get an extra reward for doing that, synergizing with the Aztec's good monks. Now, whether +1 or +2 attack on a few units has a large impact on the fight really depends on what they're up against. For example, against crossbows, the first 2 units a Jaguar defeats has no effect on the number of hits with all Castle Age upgrades, though after the 3rd crossbow, they would take them out in just 2 instead of 3 attacks. On the other hand, other units are impacted immediately, with fully upgraded knights going down 1 hit sooner for each enemy a fully upgraded Jaguar Warrior has defeated. Even more dramatic, the first longsword a Jaguar Warrior fights takes 4 hits, after which all others will take 3, so immediately the first +1 attack helps them snowball. Given the new ability clearly has a situational impact that's hard to generalize against all units, now let's see how the Jaguar Warrior's new stats hold up across some important situations. Having done a unit deep dive just last year, I already have fresh testing of the Jaguar Warrior, so we'll do a bit of a before and after, covering the most interesting and common matchups they're likely to run into. To start simply, we kind of just saw it, but this time we'll use Japanese longswordsmen to put the unit in their best light. Previously, Jaguar Warriors in this fight ended up with somewhere around 40% of their HP left, though these things always vary a bit depending on pathing. Keep in mind, longswords are actually a little more expensive now, as they swap supplies for a not quite as low default cost. If we rebalance around that and try this again today, the Jaguars end with more like 60% of their HP. That sounds extreme for swapping +5 against infantry for 5 base melee attack, which should have no net change. But remember, the extra attack from defeating units has a big impact on longswords in particular, so the numbers align to mean if anything they're a little better in this situation than before. In other cases against infantry, they're just roughly the same, and for example against pikemen, it's basically the same fight. Technically, a Jaguar with the full +4 boost can take them out 1 hit sooner, but as we've seen, those +4 units are kind of rare to generate in this kind of mass fighting. Either way, Jaguars are a big step up from Aztec longswords against pikemen, which end with around 10% less of their HP on average once we balance for cost. Now, something interesting happens with eagles though. Remember, longswords have a lot of anti-eagle bonus damage, so previously, longswords were just as good against eagles as Jaguars. With the longsword's increasing cost and the Jaguar's new ability though, Jaguars feel like they now have a slight edge, which I prefer, as they're supposed to be your anti-infantry option, and it was kind of weird the longsword was better in that one particular case. All this to say, Jaguars are just as good against infantry as before, or slightly better, but they were already very good in these matchups, and it's not like Jaguars needed to be better against infantry. The problem was that non-infantry melee units tended to beat up on them. Previously, against knights with all generic upgrades and balanced resources, the knights would win with about half their HP left, so it was just a losing play for Jaguars to take that fight. With the current balance though, that exact same test has Jaguars winning with a decent amount of HP left over. This is a huge deal, as even longswords don't beat knights with balanced resources, and Jaguars can now take on even good knight civs head to head, with Teutons and their +2 melee armor shown here as an example, meaning Jaguars are clearly no longer just an anti-infantry, but in fact an anti-melee unit specialist. For another illustration, where they barely beat even light cavalry in Castle Age before, they now clean up that unit, which just makes them more viable to mix into different army compositions and just less one-dimensional. Another quiet advantage of swapping some anti-infantry bonus for melee damage is they're now also very good against buildings, doing in the ballpark of 40% more damage to those than longswords, depending a bit on whether we're talking about with or without arson. Though it's enough of a difference that a Jaguar without arson still does more damage than a longsword with, and even just 3 or 4 Jaguar Warriors in Castle Age are hitting with about the same strength as a battering ram. They're also a little better at raiding now, taking out villagers previously in 4 but now 3 hits in Castle Age, and with fully maxed out attack from defeating enemy units need just 2. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for balance reasons, they don't actually gain attack from each villager they take down, and it's just military units that pump them up. Of course, they still have their weaknesses. Nothing about their HP or Pierce armor has changed, so they still take far fewer arrows than eagles and barely more than a longsword with gambesons, despite a higher cost, so everything from crossbows to cavalry archers to even town centerfire is still an issue. The overall picture though is pretty rosy, and for all their extra versatility against melee units like knights, they don't lose a step with their intended role as anti-infantry. Now though, let's talk about what happens in the Imperial Age. In this case, the overhaul didn't just swap some anti-infantry for more melee attack, but they actually got 2 extra melee attack on top, bringing them up to 19. With blacksmith upgrades giving +4, Garland Wars adding 4 more, and up to +4 from defeating enemy units, we're talking about 31 melee attack, plus another 6 against infantry from still having some bonus there. While it's a bit costly to get to, fully upgraded, they end up with some pretty crazy damage. It's hard to directly compare because war elephants have trample damage, but those only end up with 24 attack as a benchmark, and it's a pretty small circle of units that can 2-shot villagers. When it's all said and done, Jaguars are a more expensive but much harder hitting, higher HP, higher melee armor, and faster version of champions, with a bonus against infantry, so the results are going to be good, but let's see how much better than they were last year. To start against Aztec champions head-to-head, previously Jaguar Warriors did great, ending with 40% of their HP left over. A little surprisingly for me off the bat, or Maquahitl in this case, they don't actually end up being dramatically different now, and the difference is mostly from the champion's slightly higher overall cost. No question, they're still very good here, it's just not that much better than they were before. It's the same thing in a test against halberdiers, which I admit I have no idea why anyone would make against Aztecs. Previously, Jaguars and champions gave similar value, with about 80% HP left over or a little below, and for Jaguars now is more like 84%. Maybe just because Jaguars were already so good against infantry, the numbers don't jump out as much as I had expected. On the plus side, the slight reversal in favor of Jaguars against Eagles still holds up, and previously champions had been a little better, whereas now the Jaguar Warrior has a very clear edge, and is unambiguously the Aztecs' best anti-infantry choice without that awkward exception. For a couple of other important matchups to always check in on, with balanced resources the new Elite Jaguar Warrior doesn't beat Elite Samurai, but now beat Elite Teutonic Knights pretty decisively. These are always fun for trivia's sake, but I think reveals something about the new Jaguar Warrior, which is that it's not really stopped by melee armor much, if at all these days. To further emphasize that point, they even beat Boyars with balanced resources, despite no bonus damage helping out. For a unit that used to barely beat generic Cavaliers, you can imagine from this Boyar test alone, they become much harder to beat these days with cavalry. Not only do they end with over half their HP left against Chinese Cavaliers with balanced resources now, but they even beat Frank Paladins head-to-head, albeit not with equal numbers. Elite Jaguars now give you a way to win against heavy cavalry with just a slight numbers advantage, and I expect as players figure out how good Elite Jaguars perform against more melee units than just infantry, you'll start to see them used that way more often. Considering Aztecs don't have halberdier, having a more pop-efficient alternative to bring out against cavalry is a nice weapon to have in your back pocket. At the same time, I don't think they completely replace pikemen, as the difference in gold cost can be an important consideration, especially in 1v1s. Speaking of which though, Jaguars are also now just a decent anti-trash generalist unit, where I wouldn't have said that before. Not only do they perform very well against halberdiers, but previously lagged Aztec champions against hussars. These days, they actually end with similar or slightly more HP left than champions with balanced resources. And keep in mind, all these fights have started with fresh Jaguar Warriors, which are then ending slightly powered up by defeating some enemies, so they're a little stronger than the remaining HP implies. That means, if anything, Saul may have been slightly underselling the unit, especially if you have some monks to heal them and retain those small attack buffs. Rounding out the trash units then, they've always been decent against skirmishers, taking technically more attacks than champions with gambesons or even elite eagle warriors. Plus, they're still great against buildings, so the devs have made them just a well-rounded unit in Imperial Age, albeit with admittedly the same weaknesses as always, against arbalesters and even more so hand cannoneers, with the buffs clearly avoiding helping them in these sorts of matchups at all. I don't mean to underplay this weakness either, it's just an aspect of the unit that hasn't changed, and the differences are what are the most exciting to talk about. So was this a satisfactory way to buff the unit? In essence, it's not that different from just giving them a medium-sized bonus against cavalry and buildings, but done in a less heavy-handed way. They managed to keep their greatest strength against infantry and weaknesses to ranged units intact, while greatly improving how they perform in a lot of other situations, with heavy cavalry being the clearest example, making them just feel much more versatile. They even look cooler and more historically accurate as an added touch, though I have to admit the new suit looks pretty hot for the person wearing it, and I can't imagine it smells very good under there after a long day of fighting in the Mexican rainforest. Lucky for him, I just started a new soap and deodorant wholesale manufacturer called Spirit of the Lie. Sales are booming thanks to a great website I made with this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a great-looking website, engage with your audience, and then sell anything from products to content to time all in one place. Using either their pre-made templates or Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, you can create a fully customized website to suit your needs. It's perfect for building an online presence for a physical business or starting an online store using their built-in tools for inventory and shipping, with plenty of analytics to give you insight about your website's traffic and sales. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spiritofthelaw to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That was a fresh look at the revamped Jaguar Warrior. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.